I absolutely love making individual chocolates, particularly molded chocolates, because of how shiny they are. They can actually look like individual little jewels. I'm going to show you how to create them. I'm creating a milk chocolate lemon ganache, and the shell is going to be made out of a dark couverture chocolate. First, you have to prepare your mold when you're creating molded chocolates. Now, there's two types of molds that you can use. You can use something like this, which is a polycarbonate mold, and this is going to last longer than you, but never ever lend it to someone because it never comes back the same, always has a few scratches on it. Or you can get one of the molds that you often buy from cake decorating shops or craft shops, which are the flimsy plastic. You can use those as well, but obviously they're harder to work with, and you don't get as many uses out of them before they'll actually start to crack. So I highly recommend using a polycarbonate mold. I'm going to take some cotton wool and we're going to polish the mold. Now, manufacturers don't actually clean their mold after they mold their chocolates, they just simply polish them. So I'll leave that up to you if you want to clean it each time or if you're just going to polish it. So give it a quick polish. Molded chocolates can just have a solid color of chocolate, whether it be white, milk or dark, placed directly into the shell. What I'm going to do is a little decoration on the shell first, and then I'm going to mold it in dark chocolate. Now this decoration is a little bit messy, so I'm going to cover the bench with some plastic wrap so that I can just lift it up and throw that in the rubbish rather than trying to scrub the bench down. This is also a little bit of insurance in case my husband is watching. I would never ever put anything directly on the bench. Now I've coloured some white chocolate with some oil-soluble powder. Don't ever use a liquid, and I'm going to melt this in the microwave to temper it. I'm using white chocolate. Whenever we're working with chocolate or couverture, we must temper it. And that's only if it contains cocoa butter. If it contains vegetable fat, you don't need to temper it, but I will be very disappointed in you because it's got trans fats in it, which is very hard for your body to process. But always remember, on the label, if it states cocoa butter, it must be tempered. How much colour you add and what colour you use is totally up to you. You must sieve the colour in and then vigorously mix it. I've then set this chocolate and now I'm going to remelt it. I'm going to heat it in 30-second increments in the microwave until I've got half solid chocolate, half liquid, and then I'm simply going to stir it vigorously until all the chocolate is melted. So I think the chocolate is approximately 50% melted. So now I'm going to give it a really good stir. And then if we need to, we can place a hairdryer on it or a paint stripper gun if we've got some resistant chocolate that hasn't actually melted. So I hear you ask, how do I know if it's tempered or not? Very good question. I highly recommend you watch our YouTube video on tempering, but if you're short of time, what you're going to do, instead of watching the video, just do a test on a piece of baking paper, and we're going to leave that at room temperature. Now this is white chocolate, so it should set in 10 minutes. The only disadvantage with sometimes waiting for this to set, particularly if your room temperature is really cold, is while this is setting, the chocolate in your bowl is setting as well. So if it starts to set in your bowl, it's a good sign because it means you've tempered the chocolate, but you may need to reheat it with a hairdryer a little bit. So I'm going to place that down. We're tempered and ready to go. I've got a brush that's got quite firm bristles, and I'm going to use that to flick the chocolate. Hopefully we don't splatter any other area of the kitchen. Okay, mould in one hand. Dip the brush in. Now I'm sort of going to sneakily go to the side here so I don't actually get myself. Take off the excess chocolate, so give it a good tap. And I always recommend a practice run on the plastic first before you actually apply it to the mold. So a little bit on the plastic. Oh, that looks good. It's a little bit of a splatter. So we're ready to go now directly into the mold. Another redip. Now, if you're doing a lot of these, you will need to reheat your chocolate as you go with your hairdryer. You want to ensure that every chocolate is going to have a splatter on it. I think we're pretty well covered there. Now before the chocolate sets, we're going to scrape the top of the mold with a metal scraper. Now when scraping, be careful that the blade doesn't actually cut in and scratch the mould itself. Scrape the top until it's clean. Now we're going to temper some dark chocolate using exactly the same technique that we used with the yellow chocolate. I've tempered the dark chocolate. Now what you need to keep in mind with dark chocolate is it sets in double the time to white chocolate. So I have done a test and dark chocolate should set in 5 minutes. If it doesn't set in that time, it means your chocolate is not tempered and you need to give it additional movement and maybe add some more buttons in. It needs to be stirred really vigorously to ensure that you do temper it correctly. Now you need to make sure that the yellow chocolate in the mould has actually set before we apply the dark chocolate. Our test is set, so we're good to go. You can either pipe this in, ladle it in, or pour it in. This mould is fantastic because it has 40 chocolates per mould. The only downside is it has 2 little holes here, which makes it a little bit messy because the chocolate will come through those holes. So I'm going to pour this. Okay, give it a light tap. Make sure we've got enough chocolate in to cover each individual cavity so it's filled to the top. Using a metal scraper, we scrape along the top. That's where the messy part comes in. We've still got the plastic down. It's like a drop mat. Scrape the edges of the mould to remove any excess chocolate. And this is an important step and one that everyone forgets. It's tapping out the air bubbles. You don't have to tap it until all the air bubbles pop. You just want to tap it until air bubbles stop coming to the surface. Then I change the position of my hand, 4 fingers here, my thumb on the end. Pick up our scraper and we turn it over and give it a good tap. Beautiful thin shell, so we need to let this set. And what's important, see all this bit of chocolate around here? If we don't scrape that off, it's very difficult for the chocolate to contract away from the mould. So keep scraping the top until the top surface is clean. Chocolate everywhere. Now these are very challenging to make if you've got a humid environment or your room temperature is above 23 degrees Celsius. You can work with the fridge a little bit, but don't put them in the fridge at this stage for more than 2 minutes at a time. I'm going to now place it on its side. Now with the leftover chocolate, we simply scrape that up and remelt it. You will also need additional chocolate to seal the mould. Now for the filling. In here, I have some fresh cream, some vanilla bean paste and some sea salt. I'm going to scrape that into the pot. Zest of 1 lemon. I have the chocolate prepared in a bowl. I'm going to bring this to a boil and then I'm going to infuse it with the lemon zest for 10 minutes. Now with the lemon zest, you must strain it out before pouring it into the chocolate. If you keep it in, all the sugar in the chocolate will pull the moisture out of the zest and it ends up feeling like a foreign object, like a little bit of plastic on your tongue. So you always remove the lemon zest, particularly when you've got large amounts of sugar. We give that a whisk until it comes together, and at this stage it should be really, really shiny once all the chocolate's melted, not grainy at all. We put plastic wrap on the surface and that'll avoid it getting a skin and also help to stop the moisture evaporating. And we're going to cool this at room temperature, which should take maybe about 20 to 30 minutes. Once it's cool enough, we can pipe it into the moulds. Keep in mind that it cannot be warmer than 31 degrees Celsius or else you're going to untemper your chocolate. Don't place it in the fridge, you must leave it at room temperature to cool it down. I'm using a disposable piping bag, so roll the top of the bag down. Place the filling in. Now the filling itself should feel cool to touch. If it's even slightly warm, it is going to untemper your chocolate. So make sure you cool it down before you start piping. We're going to cut a small amount off the end of the bag, especially with a clear bag. Make sure you put that straight in the bin. Then we're going to pipe into the mould. pipe, giving yourself enough space to just seal it with chocolate. I've got the remaining chocolate from when I did the moulding, and I'm going to warm it back up. You can either use a heat gun at this stage or a hairdryer. I'm going to use a hairdryer on the mould, and that's only because the chocolates have sat overnight. And what that does is ensures that the chocolate contracts together. Just enough to soften it. We don't want to untemper the chocolate at this stage. I'm going to pour the chocolate on, and then I'm going to scrape the top of the mould to seal it. You only get one go with the scraper. If you keep scraping the top of the mould to try and get it clean, you're going to end up scraping off the chocolate and pulling up some of the filling. So try to do it in one shot. Now I'm going to give it a little bit of a tap with the side of the scraper. That'll dislodge any air bubbles. Make sure the top of the mould is completely covered. I'm going to scrape onto silicone paper, and we can remelt all that chocolate once it sets, and press really firm. If I do say so myself, it was a very nice clean scrape, so I don't have to scrape it again. Now the first stage of setting is at room temperature, as long as your room temperature is not above 24 degrees. Once it's set to touch, which should take about 5 to 6 minutes, we're going to place it in the fridge for 20 minutes. The chocolates are ready, so it's time to unmold them. You should let them come back to room temperature before unmolding them. Now, handling the mould. If we've tempered correctly when we turn it over, some may pop out, which they are. Done a good job with my tempering. Don't go too close to the edge, because some of them will actually jump out and want to go onto the floor. So on this angle, any that come out, you must move to the side. Here, we give them a little tap and the remainder should come out. Always on this angle. Oh, couple more left. Totally squashed that one. That's what you should not do when you're tapping. If you've got one underneath and you tap on top of it. As I said, always move them out from underneath, or that is exactly what is going to happen. I did this one on purpose to actually show you what not to do. These can be made in advance and left in the mould and just unmolded when you need them. They can also be stored in an airtight container until you're ready to serve them. This particular ganache will last approximately 4 weeks. It's always important to taste test as you go. Sorry for speaking with my mouth full, but that is really sensational. It's quite a soft ganache with a touch of lemon, but the milk chocolate balances beautifully with the dark chocolate shell. These are really simple to make once you know how, and delicious to boot. So only put out what you want to share and set the rest aside for your own personal chocolate stash. If you enjoyed that episode, you will love my channel. Subscribe today for even more tutorials on chocolate and baking. Best of all, it's free, so get on it.